Why did Donald Trump authorize that strike against Qassim Suleimani about 1 week ago? Well, the official word out of the White House has shifted over time. There was always some imminent threat. We've got later on in the show some more detail about Mike Pompeo attempting to explain what that means. But last night, the Wall Street Journal had an article, and in it, they had a reference to one other thing that might have been on Donald Trump's mind as he was making that decision. The section read, Mr. Trump, after the strike, told associates he was under pressure to deal with General Soleimani from GOP senators he views as important supporters in his coming impeachment trial in the Senate, associates said. That's not something that he or Mike Pompeo have brought up when asked about the rationale to launch us into this conflict.
To be fair, John, they have constantly been talking about an imminent threat. And maybe they just crossed their wires and they meant the imminent threat of impeachment.
And Mike Pompeo's been saying he doesn't know how imminent, when it's gonna happen. It's because Nancy Pelosi has held her cards close to her chest.
That's true. Now they know though, it's coming next week. This is really inappropriate. I know, welcome to the Trump world, right? But other presidencies and administrations would have at least had the decency to cover up if they were their actions were guided by totally inappropriate political considerations. Now, do politicians play politics? Of course, right? But when it comes to issues, especially of war and putting our troops in danger, well, that's a whole different level. And for them to be such knuckleheads that they're allies in the Wall Street Journal because the rest of the article is framed as like they made quick and bold and decisive moves, right? For them to let them know, oh yeah, we didn't want to be impeached. So, and by the way, the second implication of that is senators like Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton are such warmongers that apparently there's a little bit of an implication that, hey, you know what? Maybe we would be open to being tougher on Trump in the Senate if we don't get our bloody war. And that's also really interesting.
One thing that people aren't talking about after reading this is not just the sort of the impeachment distraction argument that people were talking about. I don't know how much I believe that, but what this speaks to me is also the fragility of support. Even though it's widespread, it seems that there's some fragility to the support the president enjoys among Republicans and in the Senate. And as you get closer to an election, as you get closer to another even year in 2022, you have this feeling that maybe Republicans are starting to look at these poll numbers and think that these things matter. The other part of it is you had lots of members of the military, former members of the military, testifying in front of the House Judiciary Committee, and military members of the US Senate, Republicans and Democrats, but Republicans in this case, will look at that and they will say, we have to actually give some sort of leverage to the people who testified who were members of the military. But the fact that they would even need to do something to appeal to Republican senators if this is true says a lot about where they feel their support is in general in the US Senate among Republicans.
So that's what I want to ask about, because obviously I think this is compelling, and I am certain that whatever his reason for authorizing the strike was, it wasn't just I thought it was in the best interest of our country.
Right.
We know that that's not the case. But is this what was actually like? Is he worried that Lindsey Graham is going to vote to remove him? Really, or Tom Cotton, or whoever. I just find that to be so hard to believe. Now that doesn't mean that Trump couldn't still be scared of it. He's an idiot. But I don't think, I think he's been given every reason to be confident of how this Senate trial is going to go. To do something this out of left field, because of that fear in particular, I find hard to buy.
Well, so let me partly agree with both of you. So I don't think that it's a credible threat that Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton are going to vote against him in impeachment. No way, no way. On the other hand, the part I'll agree with Michael on is you only need 4 Republican senators to call witnesses.
Right.
And the witnesses could be very, very damaging. So,
but Cenk, these weren't the Republicans that were going to be voting for witnesses. Presumably, Tom Cotton is with the president, Lindsey Graham's with the president. You don't do this to appeal to Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney and Susan Collins. And,
I know,
yeah.
but the only card that Graham and Cotton have, the warmongers have, is, well, like it's such a preposterous idea that they would vote against them in impeachment. But it's not preposterous for them to be the fourth vote if McCroskey, Collins, and Romney vote to allow witnesses. Now, but do I think that even that is a credible threat? No, not really. And so what do I think it shows? I think it shows that the president is super easy to bluff. And remember, I mean, we don't know if there's a secret deal with Turkey to enrich Donald Trump, but we do know that Erdogan bluffed and said, I'm going into northern Syria tomorrow, whether you like it or not. And Trump panicked and pulled out our troops immediately. And remember, Trump himself is a giant bluffer. Throughout his entire business career, all he's ever done is bluff. So he could be doing projections here. And so it's possible that Graham and Cotton came in there with like, I don't know, how do we start a war? The guy's not that bright. Maybe we just bluff him, right? And maybe it worked. But overall, obviously, all of these are illegitimate concerns if you actually care about national security and not your own political career. But I want to say one other thing about the Wall Street Journal article. They also framed all of his advisors as much more hawkish than previously known. So Pompeo has wanted to go to war with Iran for a long time. By the way, he's not the defense secretary, he's the Secretary of State. He's supposed to do diplomacy. He's doing the opposite. Esper, who is the defense secretary, went to West Point with Pompeo, and they're apparently old friends, and apparently Esper will do what Pompeo commands. But the key here is Mark Milley, the head of the Joint Chiefs. And Lindsey Graham gave a quote like, Mark Milley's been a pleasant surprise, willing to take more risk than we had imagined, meaning he is more happy to go to war and listen to orders from Donald Trump to take impulsive military action. And apparently they didn't check with a lot of folks, including our allies, obviously Congress, the other parts of the State Department, other parts of the Pentagon that you normally do to execute these operations. The Trump administration rushing in haphazardly, who could have guessed? But it turns out the people that are around him now in the Oval Office are simply enablers. He's gotten rid of any dissent. So that's more dangerous because that means any given impulse driven by insecurities or political calculations at any given moment, which could change later, but at that moment will be executed and could lead to disastrous consequences.
It says a lot that John Bolton was not hawkish enough for this crew, apparently. That they've just, John, sorry, you gotta get out of the room.
But you can just sort of picture like all of them like in a room in the White House cheering as they go to like get ready for war with Iran, and like the window looking in is Bolton with his hand on the glass. Like he just wishes he could be part of that club. But let me talk, you were talking about impulse and insecurities. So I wanna throw it back as a potential alternative explanation that I believe might be a simpler explanation. So we had this sort of bombshell accidentally, kind of, from the Wall Street Journal last night. Over the weekend, we had New York Times reporting that was like ignored by everyone, and I don't understand how. But effectively what they said is, and I'm gonna skip ahead one graphic. Initially, you had the death of the military contractor in that attack in Iraq. And then you had the heads of the Pentagon coming forward and giving a menu of potential options from least severe and crazy to most severe and crazy, including the option to take out Soleimani, which was considered to be, well, no one would actually do that. But apparently they like to put things that seem crazy on to make other options seem more reasonable. And so at first, it seemed everything was going according to plan. Trump rejected the option to kill Soleimani to respond to a wave of recent Iranian-sponsored violence in Iraq. Instead, he authorized airstrikes against Kataib Hezbollah. Then things changed when protesters gathered outside the US Embassy in Baghdad on Tuesday. Iranians saw the US response as disproportionate, but Trump became increasingly angry at the images he saw on television as protesters stormed the embassy. Suddenly, Trump was worried that failing to respond to the protests would look weak. By Thursday, Trump had decided to go forward with the killing of Soleimani, and top Pentagon officials were stunned. That's a direct quote from the New York Times article. They had assumed he would go with the less risky option. And I think to buttress that this might be explanation enough, how many times over the past week has Donald Trump said, this was the anti-Benghazi, this was the opposite of Benghazi? And so the idea that he could be, like, he could think, well, my only option to not be pitched as basically Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton in this situation is, I need to do something crazy. That's the craziest thing they gave me as an option, so let's do that.
Well, that goes 2 points. One is, as Young Turks viewers will remember from earlier in the week, the minute we had the Soleimani killing, I said he's trying to respond in a way that so he doesn't get painted as Benghazi-like. Okay, so and it's not hard to discern. It's good to get the confirmation from the papers and inside officials. But Trump himself, before the strike, kept saying like, "Oh, I'm not going to do a Benghazi. It's not going to be a Benghazi." I mean, he looked absolutely panicked about the idea that there would be a Benghazi-like situation. So I thought that was the number one reason that he did it, and it looks like now it's fairly confirmed that it was. But apparently there's also these political considerations. So maybe in his mind, he thought it was a win-win. I helped myself politically with impeachment, and I look tough, which gets me to the last point. Look, the guy is deeply insecure, and he's so concerned about looking weak that he oftentimes acts irrationally and rashly. And now we have a team, according to the Wall Street Journal, again, they're largely allies of the president, but they're telling us, yeah, his team will do whatever he says, and they're comfortable with more risk and more war, and they don't really want to check with anyone else. That sets up an absolutely explosive situation. It seems like we barely avoided it this time around, apparently thanks to Tucker Carlson. But God knows what happens next time. And if Donald Trump is listening to the wrong Fox News show, well, the whole world better brace for impact.
Yeah, it reminds you of President Cheney when he had this kind of control over that part of the White House.
Yeah. But even with Cheney, he always wanted to go to war. But ironically, his slight check for 6 years was Bush, and in the last 2 years, Bush even rejected Cheney.
But in the last 2 years, but when there've been the first 6 were a disaster.
So, the first 6 were the Cheney administration. But he had to maneuver things. He had to move things around in the chessboard. Whereas these guys just come in and go, "Hey, Trump, we'll hurt you slightly politically." Okay, I'll do it. Hey, Trump, you look weak. Oh yeah, I'm strong. I'll do it. Right, so that's much easier because I mean I remember during the Bush years we just thought there's no way a president is ever going to be this unintelligent again. Oh boy, were we wrong. So I'm not afraid to
next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, remember in the old days, Reagan was considered very unintelligent. That was the main knock on him. And then the Xerox copy got way worse in Bush, and then it got way worse in Trump. Oh my God, what's next?
Yeah, and 2 other quick considerations. One, I guess thank God that the craziest option they came up with was taking out Soleimani and not, bomb Tehran or whatever, which could have been an option, or bases in Iran. And also, like imagine if as he's sitting stewing, he's watching the news, people have surrounded the embassy, they set the outer room on fire or something, and he's just getting so mad and he feels like I look weak, I'm gonna look like Obama. Imagine if he had just relaxed. That would have been it. We wouldn't be talking about the storming of that embassy anymore. It wouldn't even be a story.
But now died.
Hundreds of people have died as a result of his freak out over it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
imagine what he's going to do if there's a rogue militia group, a rogue terrorist group, somebody who has no affiliation with any national government at all, doing something that is perceived here as on the level with what happened at the embassy. Imagine that response if what Cenk is saying is true, is that everybody's just a yes man and one maybe yes woman in the room. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, look, last thing guys, it's amazing we made it this far without him blowing up the planet, but we still have one long year left. And remember, in that year, the market could crash, which could make Donald Trump very, very insecure. And either because of that or just for other reasons, his polls numbers could get even worse. They've always been terrible, but they could get into the 30s, in which case that would inspire panic. Then what is this irrational, insecure fool going to do surrounded by yes men who like war?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's why I tell you to brace for impact. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.